In 2016, the United Kingdom voted to walk away from the European Union. Shortly after, the United States withdrew from the Paris Climate Accord. These are cases of unilateral exit. One state decides to break its commitments, while all other participating nations remain legally bound to the agreement. When a major power abruptly leaves the table, observers panic. The immediate fear is that these exits will trigger global arms races and cause the entire system of international law to unravel. Does breaking a treaty actually destroy a state's future ability to cooperate internationally, or is that fear overblown? To answer that, political scientists test three competing models. If we plot time against international cooperation, we can map what happens the moment a state leaves an agreement. The first model is the byproduct theory. It argues that if a state withdraws, the underlying diplomatic relationship must have already soured, meaning cooperation drops long before the actual exit. The second model is the reputation theory. Because exits are public, withdrawing states brand themselves as unreliable. Therefore, every country on Earth, whether they were part of the broken treaty or not, will immediately reduce cooperation with the exiting state. The third model is the experiential theory. This model argues the damage is exclusively relational. Only the specific treaty members, those left holding the bag, will punish the exiting state. Non-members, unaffected by the broken promise, won't care. To find out which model reflects reality, researchers analyzed a massive dataset from the United Nations Treaty Series, examining 222 initial unilateral exits spanning from 1945 to 2010. Whichever trajectory this data follows reveals whether global cooperation relies on universal reputations or specific, direct experiences. Multilateral treaties are networked. States join and leave sequentially. This structure creates a perfect natural laboratory to run a difference in differences experiment. We start with a central state connected to surrounding nations across shared treaties. When it breaks an agreement, the nations inside become our treatment group. They experience the exit. Remaining nations on different treaties form our control group, outside observers to this broken promise. The key metric here is joins. We track exactly how many new treaties both the treatment and control states ratify with the central state following the withdrawal. To guarantee a clean test, researchers used Mahalanobis distance matching. This ensures the treatment and control groups had identical military capabilities, trade volume, and cooperation levels in the 4 years leading up to the exit. This architecture isolates the exact relational damage of a single broken promise, filtering out the background noise of global politics. This chart plots average treaty joins for both groups over a 20-year window, centered on the exact year of withdrawal. Looking at the left side, the 10 years prior to exit, trends for both members and non-members run parallel and flat. Because cooperation remains steady and doesn't drop in anticipation, the byproduct theory is mathematically eliminated. Now look at the dotted line in the shaded region, representing non-members. After year 0, their rate of cooperation stays completely flat. This eliminates the reputation theory. Non-members ignore the event and continue cooperating.
The reaction is entirely contained within the solid black line. Treaty members, the nations directly scorned, diverge downward sharply and sustain that drop for nearly a decade. This difference in differences plot isolates that penalty. On average, a unilateral exit causes a 7.9% drop in new treaty joins from the scorned members over the next 7 years. The data confirms the experiential theory. A global, generalized reputation for unreliability is a myth. Diplomatic trust is strictly experiential. It matters exactly with whom you break a commitment. This raises a boundary question. Does walking away from an environmental pact ruin your chances of signing a future trade deal? It depends on the material costs inflicted. We can divide agreements into 2 categories: diffuse cost treaties, like human rights or environmental pacts, and direct cost treaties, like security alliances and economic trade agreements. This matrix charts if punishment stays within an issue area or spills across sectors. The bottom row shows diffuse cost fallouts are contained, but the top row reveals exiting a direct cost security pact causes the penalty to spill over aggressively, tanking entirely unrelated agreements.
The diplomatic penalty for breaking a treaty scales directly with the material cost inflicted on your former partners. Hurt their wallets or their borders, and they will freeze you out everywhere else. We can test these findings against historical reality. In 1966, French President Charles de Gaulle unilaterally withdrew France from the NATO Status of Forces Agreement. De Gaulle campaigned on this exit for years, and the withdrawal was broadcast globally. Under the byproduct or reputation models, this public move should have triggered widespread preemptive diplomatic fallout. The nations directly inside the treaty were furious. U.S. President Lyndon Johnson and West German officials immediately sought to extract concessions and punish France in other, ongoing multilateral negotiations. But nations outside the treaty reacted exactly as the data predicts. Japan, perfectly aware of the withdrawal, remained conspicuously silent, issuing zero statements and continuing normal relations. The Soviet Union viewed the exit through a lens of pure opportunism rather than reputational distrust. Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev immediately offered to sign new non-aggression pacts with France. The historical record aligns precisely with the empirical data. There was no global reputational broadcast, only highly localized, severe relational damage among the spurned allies. Policymakers often justify treaty withdrawal by pointing to the immediate cash saved and the reclamation of sovereign control, but this narrow accounting ignores the data-proven long-term cost. A state's ability to exert influence relies on its power to convene alliances. Every unilateral exit leads to a sustained drop in new partnerships with the specific nations it left behind. Walking away from a treaty does not cause the entire global order to collapse, but it does burn the specific diplomatic bridges required to build vital coalitions in the future. In international relations, states cannot escape the consequences of broken promises, not because the whole world is watching, but because the victims never forget.